up, everybody? Mike B here with Bombero Bus, working on Roxanne. Just got done tuning the dual carbs, and I got a couple of things in the mail today. One of them was this synchronization tool, a snail tool, and I liked it. I've been pretty good at tuning these carbs, but the synchronization, it turns out, was off. Not by much, but I definitely tell the improvement after getting them on par with each other. So I'm definitely glad to have this, something I'll keep from now on. We're going to start it up and listen to it. There may be some tweaking left to do. Like I said, I just tuned it. And the bigger thing is I'm going to talk about this crank pulley that's been plaguing me since I've had the bus. That's been the biggest problem I've had yet. It's been chewing up belts, and those that survive, it flips them. So I've always had to keep 2 or 3 extra belts in the bus, and just the other day it flipped one and destroyed it, and we were stranded until I could change the belt, which was no big deal, but it ought not to be that way. Something was definitely wrong, and I think I discovered what it is. So after that, we'll talk about part 2 of these curtains. In the first one, I only showed you how I did the front curtains. Roxanne has them all the way around now. So I'm going to show you the way that I chose to do that. So we're going to start it up, listen to it, and I'll talk about that crankcase pulley and some problems that I found with it. Okay, we'll get right to it. This pulley that you see here has been the solution. It appears to be a stock original Volkswagen pulley. There's a lot to be said for that. These aftermarket parts that I've been using, some of them are okay, and most of them are not. And we're going to talk about the aftermarket pulleys I had and the problems they caused and how this one has been the solution. So right out of the gate, if you can see here, this belt is actually recessed into the groove just a little bit. So what was going on, the other aftermarket pulley, the same size belt was not recessed into this groove. It was sticking out farther than the lip of this pulley. It didn't look right, but I didn't know any better or think it would be a problem. But it was, because as this would turn right here at probably the torqueiest point, that belt would flip. It would crawl out of the groove and flip. So I thought, well, look at that belt. It needs to be maybe sitting deeper in the groove. So I found as skinny of belts as I could, and no matter what I did, it just would not sit right in the groove of the pulley like it is now. But let me tell you what caused me to put that aftermarket pulley on there in the first place. Back here, where the crankcase opens up, there is no seal there. So we're going to look at this pulley and show you what they do for that. This is the back of the pulley. You see that thread on there? That thread, as I understand it, is a reversed one, so that as this crank turns, it pushes air in to the crankcase. These threads create a force that pushes air in to the crankcase. So any blow-by or extra crankcase pressure that you have that might want to push oil out of that hole, this spiraled thread will push air that way, counteracting the crankcase pressure. And I hope that made sense. Well, what prompted me to change them in the first place was the original pulley that was on there was not flipping belts. But the blow-by pressure that was coming out of the case here was so much so, it was soaking my motor. And I'd have to wipe it down after just about every ride. So I looked into it and pulled the pulley off, and it had the thread going the wrong way. The thread was actually pulling air out of the crankcase, if that makes sense. It was doing the opposite of what its job was. So it was a cheap knockoff pulley that actually had the threads going the wrong way. And if you know about VWs, that's a big deal. That's part of what keeps these motors cool and keeps the motor and the extra pressure in the crankcase from blowing out the back and spraying your motor. So I got a new pulley, and it was an aftermarket pulley, and I got it from the local shop, and no one told me to be any the wiser. But what happened with the new pulley is it did mitigate. It didn't totally solve, but it mitigated the pressure I had coming out of that crankcase hole. So I was happy. But from that point on, it started flipping belts faster than I could buy them. Like I said, it was the pulley plague is what I like to call it. So what was going on is, although the new pulley had the threads going a correct way, the galley here was so narrow that no belt would fit properly inside of it, and it was causing it to creep and crawl out and then flip. So I have what I believe to be an original stock VW pulley on there. As soon as I slid this belt on it, I could tell this is how it's meant to be, because this belt fit in there just right. Since then, haven't had any problem with it. I've revved it higher than I even ever have before, purposely trying to flip the belt, and it seems to be holding. So I don't drive her hard wherever I go, but I've been doing that to see if I could throw this belt, because I want to know before I go on the road. So that just goes to show you, lesson learned. You can't help but dabble in these aftermarket parts. If you're going to have an air-cooled VW, you just have to learn which ones can be used and which ones can't. So in particular, that was my lesson about pulleys. There might be some aftermarket ones that are just fine, but for me, I'm going to continue to use a stock crankcase pulley, and unless she fails me shortly after this video, I'm going to call that a win, and that's how I'll run this bus from now on. So now we're going to get into the curtains. You see they're all the way around. I'm going to show you how I got those up.